Revenge can take many forms. But for one 21-year-old woman, revenge meant death by installments. When betrayal cut deeper than any wound, she chose to transform her pain into a weapon that would destroy not just her targets, but entire families. This isn't a story about a quick act of violence. This is a calculated campaign of devastation that unfolded over years. A young mother, armed with a secret more deadly than any bullet, who deliberately targeted married men in a twisted quest for vengeance. Welcome to True Crime Stories 24/7. Before we continue, I must warn our viewers that this episode contains sensitive content involving intentional disease transmission, psychological trauma, and topics that some viewers may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. Imagine discovering that the father of your children has given you a death sentence. Now imagine turning that sentence into a weapon. In the bustling streets of Kingston, Jamaica, a 21-year-old woman named Katrina received news that would shatter her world, and in response, she would choose to shatter the worlds of others. The statistics are really shocking. In Jamaica alone, over 34,000 people live with HIV. But behind these numbers lie stories of both victims and perpetrators. In 2016, more than 2,000 new HIV cases were diagnosed, a shocking increase from 1,222 cases the previous year. But how many of these were acts of revenge? Around the world, cases of intentional HIV transmission have become a growing concern. From Canada to Australia, legal systems grapple with this unique form of assault, one that turns the human body into a weapon and intimacy into a tool of destruction. If you're interested in understanding the depths of human nature, the complex web of revenge, and the possibility of redemption, make sure to subscribe to True Crime Stories 24/7 and hit that notification bell. Every week we go deep into cases that challenge our understanding of justice, morality, and human behavior. The year was 2006. While the world celebrated technological advances and social progress, in a small Jamaican community, a young woman was executing a plan of revenge that would leave lasting scars on countless lives. Her weapon wasn't a gun or a knife. It was her own body, infected with a virus that would slowly, methodically, destroy her targets from within. But what drives someone to such extremes? How does a young mother transform from victim to perpetrator? And most importantly, can redemption ever truly follow such calculated destruction? As we unravel this story, you'll witness a deathbed confession that changed everything: the systematic targeting of married men, the moment conscience finally overcame revenge, and a transformation that nobody saw coming. This isn't just another fake or fictional crime story. This is a true journey into the darkest corners of human revenge, where the weapon isn't just the virus, it's trust itself. Where every intimate moment becomes a potential death sentence, and where the line between victim and perpetrator blurs beyond recognition. Today, we'll take you inside the mind of a woman who chose to weaponize her diagnosis. We'll hear from those affected, examine the legal implications, and explore the complex web of emotions that led to these devastating choices. But to understand how a young mother could make such a devastating choice, we need to go back to the genesis of this case. Back to the moment when one man's cruel confession set this tragic chain of events in motion. You are watching True Crime Stories 24/7. I welcome you once again. This video is a story of how a 21-year-old lady infected married men with HIV as her revenge. A true crime documentary that will challenge everything you think you know about revenge, justice, and redemption. In the heart of Kingston, Jamaica, Katrina's life seemed picture-perfect on the surface. A vibrant 21-year-old mother, she balanced the joys of raising her children with the dreams of a promising future. Her days were filled with the ordinary moments that make up a young family's life: morning routines, children's laughter, and plans for tomorrow. The father of her children appeared to be everything she wanted in a partner. He was present, caring, and seemed devoted to their small family. Together, they created a life that many young couples would envy. There were no warning signs, no red flags that could have prepared her for what was coming. A betrayal so profound it would alter not just her life, but the lives of countless others. But beneath this facade of domestic bliss, a deadly secret was brewing. A secret that would only come to light in the most devastating way possible. It started with his illness. What seemed like a common flu grew worse with each passing day. Doctors' visits became more frequent, tests were ordered, and worry began to creep into their daily lives. But even as his condition deteriorated, he maintained his silence about the true nature of his illness. Then came the moment that would shatter her world forever. Lying in his hospital bed, growing weaker by the day, he finally spoke the words that would transform their love story into a nightmare. With an emotionless voice and what she would later describe as no remorse, he revealed his HIV status. But it wasn't just a confession. It was a death sentence he had knowingly passed to her. "I thought he was joking," Katrina would later recall, her voice trembling with the memory. "He was so flat about it, so casual, as if he were telling me what he had for lunch." The casual nature of his confession only added to the horror of the moment. This wasn't a tragic accident or an unfortunate discovery. This was a deliberate act of betrayal. The shock hit her like a physical blow. Her mind raced with questions. How long had he known? How many others might be infected? What about their children? The weight of these questions would keep her awake for countless nights to come. Fear gripped her so tightly that she couldn't bring herself to face the truth. When the doctor called with her test results, she couldn't bear to hear the confirmation of what she already knew in her heart. "I would rather not know," she told herself, as if denial could somehow change her reality. Nights became an endless battle with consciousness. "There were nights when I would stay up all night because I feared falling asleep and not waking up," she revealed. Every shadow became a reminder of her mortality, every moment of fatigue a possible symptom. But as the initial shock began to fade, something else took its place. Something darker, more dangerous. The fear and denial slowly transformed into a burning rage. The man who should have protected her, who should have loved her, had instead used that love as a weapon against her. Her mind began to wander down darker paths. If one person could so callously infect another, pass on a death sentence without remorse, then perhaps revenge wasn't just an option. Perhaps it was justice. This was the moment everything changed. The young mother who once dreamed of a happy family life now harbored thoughts of vengeance. Her trust hadn't just been broken, it had been weaponized against her. And in that transformation from victim to avenger, she made a choice that would echo through countless lives. Her first thoughts of revenge weren't explosive or dramatic. They crept in slowly, like poison seeping into pure water. They came in quiet moments, when seeing happy couples on the street, when watching her children play, when thinking about her uncertain future. The happy young mother who once filled her days with hope and love was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone who would soon transform her pain into a weapon, her betrayal into a mission. A woman who would decide that if she had to live with this sentence, she wouldn't do so alone. But she didn't just want revenge against one person. No, her target had already stolen that opportunity by confessing on his deathbed. Her vengeance would need to cast a wider net. And so began her dark transformation from victim to perpetrator, from betrayed to betrayer. As we'll soon discover, this was just the beginning of a journey that would leave a trail of devastated families in its wake. A journey that would raise questions about justice, morality, and the true price of revenge. "God brought me on my feet again, and I am living my life to the fullest," she said. Now happily engaged to a younger partner, Katrina practices full disclosure about her status. "I never hide my status from my partner. When I tell him, he becomes more attached to me. I think it's because I am honest enough to say it." Robert, speaking for HIV Support Center, emphasizes that Katrina's story, while tragic, isn't uncommon. "We have professional counselors. Sometimes their initial reaction is to seek revenge by spreading the virus, but we encourage them not to, and the responses are usually positive." The organization continues to promote disclosure and responsible decisions for couples affected by HIV. Today, there are growing calls in Jamaica's legal circles to criminalize the willful spread of HIV. While Katrina's personal redemption offers hope, her story serves as both a warning and a reminder of the complex human toll of betrayal, revenge, and ultimately, forgiveness. Every choice has consequences, but in this dark tale of revenge, Those consequences rippled through entire families, destroying marriages, futures, and innocent lives caught in the crossfire. Let's talk about one particular victim, a married man whose moment of weakness would cost not just his own health, but would sentence his innocent wife to a lifetime of medications and doctor visits. He was like many of her targets, comfortable in his marriage, successful, and perhaps a bit too confident. When they met, he insisted on not using protection. "He wanted to feel me raw," Katrina would later recall, her voice carrying the weight of knowing what would follow. Despite her suggesting protection, his insistence would prove fatal, not just for him, but for the wife waiting at home, completely unaware that her life was about to change forever. The devastating impact on families went far beyond just health. Marriages crumbled as secrets came to light. Children watched their parents waste away, not understanding why. Bank accounts were drained by mounting medical bills. The community whispered, pointed fingers, and families that were once respected found themselves isolated by stigma and fear. But it was a chance encounter years later that would bring the full weight of her actions crashing down on Katrina's conscience. While sitting in the clinic waiting room, getting her own HIV medications, she saw her, the wife, the innocent victim of her revenge. She wasn't just a nameless casualty anymore, she was a real person, sitting there, dealing with the consequences of a vendetta she had no part in. "She told me that her husband had slept around and now she is suffering," Katrina remembered, the moment etched forever in her memory. "My heart sank." The woman spoke about her condition without knowing she was talking to the very person who had deliberately infected her husband. The ripple effects through the community were devastating. Friends stopped visiting infected families. Children were told not to play with the children of infected parents. Churches that should have offered comfort sometimes turned their backs. The stigma of HIV in Jamaica turned victims into outcasts. The legal system struggled to address this new form of assault. How do you prosecute someone for deliberately spreading a virus? What evidence do you need? What penalties are appropriate? While some countries had laws specifically addressing intentional HIV transmission, Jamaica at the time did not. Medical professionals watched helplessly as more victims appeared in their clinics. Each new case represented not just an individual infection, but entire families thrown into crisis. The healthcare system strained to provide expensive medications to an ever-growing number of patients. Support organizations like HIV Support Center found themselves overwhelmed, trying to help not just those infected, but entire families dealing with the aftermath. They provided counseling, resources, and support, but the needs seemed endless. The psychological trauma extended far beyond the infected. Children watched their parents deteriorate, spouses became caregivers, and families faced impossible choices between buying medications or paying rent. Trust in relationships was shattered. If this could happen to these families, it could happen to anyone. But perhaps the most chilling aspect was how the fear spread through the community. Every new diagnosis raised suspicions. Every relationship carried new risks. The shadow of what Katrina had done changed how people viewed intimacy, trust, and marriage itself. The wife's story particularly haunts this narrative. A faithful partner who did everything right, who trusted her husband, who built a life with him, only to have it all destroyed by a stranger's revenge against men like her husband. Her presence in that clinic waiting room stands as testament to how revenge, like the virus itself, often claims innocent victims. The medical records tell a clinical story. Viral loads, CD4 counts, medication regimens. But they can't capture the human cost. The birthdays spent in hospital rooms, the children growing up watching their parents struggle, the dreams and plans that had to be abandoned as families adapted to their new reality. Years later, these families still carry the scars of Katrina's revenge. Some found strength and rebuilt their lives around their new reality. Others crumbled under the weight of illness, stigma, and broken trust. But all of them serve as living reminders that revenge, when unleashed, rarely affects only its intended target. In 2006, everything changed. That chance encounter in the clinic with an innocent victim, a wife suffering from a vendetta she never deserved, cracked the shell of anger Katrina had built around herself. Seeing the real human cost of her actions, hearing the pain in another woman's voice, suddenly made her revenge feel less like justice and more like what it truly was: a cycle of pain that had to end. "My heart sank," Katrina would later confess, describing that pivotal moment. "I knew I had to make a change. The weight of her actions, the lives she had destroyed, the families she had torn apart, it all came crashing down on her conscience at once. The revenge that had once felt so justified now felt like chains around her soul." But facing the consequences meant first facing herself. The journey back to Kingston wasn't just a physical return. It was a symbolic step toward confronting everything she had done. Walking the same streets where her story began, she had to face neighbors who knew her story, doctors who had treated her victims, and a community still reeling from the impact of her actions. The decision to start taking her medication regularly wasn't easy. Each pill was a reminder of how this all began, of the betrayal that started her down this dark path. But it was also a step toward taking responsibility for her own life and health. "There were days when I couldn't look at myself in the mirror," she admitted, "but I knew I had to live, if only to try to make amends." The mental health journey proved to be the most challenging part of her transformation. How do you process the guilt of knowingly infecting others? How do you sleep at night knowing families were destroyed because of your actions? The weight of these questions could have crushed her, but instead became the foundation for her change. Professional counseling played a crucial role in her recovery. Through therapy, she began to understand the depth of her trauma, how the initial betrayal had twisted her sense of justice, and how revenge had poisoned her soul even more than the virus had affected her body. "I cursed God, and I hated men," she reflected on her darkest days. "I even secretly blamed my family, although I knew that they had no influence on my status." This raw honesty about her mental state shows just how deep the psychological wounds went, and how far she had to climb to find redemption. The support system she once rejected became her lifeline. HIV Support Center, the same organization that helps others cope with their diagnosis, helped her navigate not just the medical aspects of her condition, but also the overwhelming guilt and shame of her past actions. Could this tragic chain of events have been prevented? The question haunts everyone involved in this story. If there had been better support systems in place when she first received her diagnosis, if the stigma surrounding HIV hadn't been so overwhelming, if her children's father had been honest sooner, if the healthcare system had reached out more aggressively. The turning points were there, moments where intervention might have changed everything. The initial diagnosis, where proper counseling could have redirected her anger. The early days of her revenge, where mental health support might have stopped her. The period of isolation, where community support could have made a difference. The times she considered stopping but didn't know how to face what she'd done. Each of these moments represented a chance to break the cycle of trauma and revenge. Each was a potential fork in the road where her story could have taken a different turn. Yet even in the darkness of this story, there's a crucial lesson about redemption. Katrina's awakening proves that change is possible, even after committing terrible acts. Her return to Kingston, her decision to take responsibility for her health, her commitment to honest relationships. These steps show that while we can't change the past, we can choose a different future. Today, she speaks openly about her status with potential partners, turning her story into a warning for others who might consider revenge. "I never hide my status," she says, finding that honesty, the very thing she once feared, has become her strength. But the question remains: how many lives could have been saved if the right support had been there from the beginning? How many families would still be whole if the stigma around HIV hadn't driven her into isolation? These questions don't just apply to Katrina's story. They challenge us to think about how we as a society respond to trauma, betrayal, and the desire for revenge. To understand the full scope of this story, we need to look at the bigger picture in Jamaica. By 2016, over 34,000 Jamaicans were living with HIV, with more than 2,000 new cases reported that year alone, nearly double from the previous year's 1,222 cases. But these aren't just numbers. Each case represents a person, a family, a story. Jamaica's legal system, like many others worldwide, struggled to address intentional HIV transmission. The absence of specific laws made prosecution difficult, leaving victims with little legal recourse. This gap in legislation sparked intense debates about personal responsibility, criminal intent, and public health protection. The social stigma surrounding HIV in Jamaica can't be overstated. It's a shadow that follows diagnosis, affecting everything from job opportunities to family relationships. Many victims suffer in silence, fearing the judgment and isolation that often comes with revelation. But within this challenging landscape, organizations like HIV Support Center work tirelessly to provide hope and help. They offer counseling, medication support, and perhaps most importantly, a community where people can find understanding without judgment. The warning signs of potential revenge scenarios have become clearer through cases like Katrina's. Healthcare providers now watch for extreme anger or depression following diagnosis, isolation from support systems, expressions of revenge, fantasies, resistance to medication or counseling, high-risk sexual behavior. For Katrina, transformation began with acceptance. The journey from vengeful victim to responsible survivor wasn't quick or easy. It required facing hard truths, accepting responsibility, and making conscious choices every day to be better. Her medical compliance became a symbol of this change. Each pill represented not just her health, but her commitment to living responsibly. The same medications she once refused became daily reminders of her choice to embrace life rather than spread death. Perhaps most remarkably, Katrina found love again. Her approach to relationships transformed completely, from weapons of revenge to opportunities for honest connection. "I never hide my status from my partner," she says. This transparency, once unthinkable, became her strength. Today, Katrina's story serves as both warning and hope. Her current life demonstrates that redemption is possible, even from the darkest of places. She's engaged to a younger partner who knows her status and her story, proving that honesty can lead to acceptance and love. Public health experts point to several critical lessons from this case. The importance of immediate counseling after diagnosis. The need for stronger support systems. The crucial role of education in reducing stigma. The value of accessible healthcare. The importance of legal frameworks that address intentional transmission. The societal responsibilities are clear. We must remove the stigma that drives people into isolation. Healthcare systems must provide comprehensive support. Communities must create safe spaces for honest dialogue. Legal systems must balance justice with compassion. The long-term consequences of Katrina's actions continue to ripple through families and communities. Yet her transformation offers hope that cycles of revenge can be broken. Her story challenges us to consider how we support those facing life-changing diagnoses. Resources exist for anyone facing similar struggles. HIV testing and counseling centers, mental health support services, support groups for those affected, legal advocacy organizations, crisis intervention hotlines. The lessons are clear but challenging. Early intervention is crucial. Support systems save lives. Honesty breaks cycles of transmission. Redemption is possible. Community matters. As we conclude this story, remember that behind every statistic is a human being. Behind every diagnosis is a story, and within every dark moment lies the potential for change. Katrina's journey from revenge to redemption reminds us that while we can't change our past, we can always choose our future. For True Crime Stories 24/7, this has been a story of betrayal, revenge, and ultimately, redemption. Join me in my next video as we explore another case that challenges our understanding of justice, morality, and the human capacity for both darkness and light. Please do not forget, if you or someone you know is struggling with an HIV diagnosis or thoughts of revenge, help is available. The cycle of pain can be broken. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is reach out and ask for help. It's as simple as that. Till I come your way again, stay informed, stay compassionate, and keep watching True Crime Stories 24/7, where we bring you the stories that matter, the lessons that count, and the truth that needs to be told. Thanks for watching, and God bless you.